Services Committee, which is being conducted from the chamber and remotely through Microsoft Teams. Please ensure your microphones are off, and before we begin, I would like to invite Reverend Hugh Stewart to lead us in prayer. Thank you.
Gat de bhla agus ceanna nula san tíolach de gráis tíorna Iesu Christ. Agus an áchas héna torscain tre bhí chur an Ierebs áwnsan, Christ anamse, dáchas na glóra. Tá sin gat de bhla san gach báil ha láthir in dú. Agus na hofigarins, na teacherins, clown ans na scoltin fug Nielanen. Tá sin i gúide a dhéag am dúsa gan bianachig, gan trárachig, gan misnachig, agus go mé gachní hat de Gianni van Adanamse son a clown is sarabachig, agus bí mar bad tjene mar tjumichel inis in an bháseo, agus go de bianachig agus a trárachig gach rúnig a bhí sé Gianni a chuim mai cláine, a chuim de glóra féin skach Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Stewart. So the meeting is now being recorded, and with regard to conduct of the meeting, I'll just remind everyone of the conduct. So translation facilities are available for this meeting. Please ensure that you have your headsets, which are available at the back of the chamber if required. If you're a member of the committee attending remotely, please leave your camera on and your microphone off. Officers attending remotely, please leave both off unless you are called to speak to a report or answer a question. A reminder to members and officers in the chamber of the queuing system. The chair controls the mics. First in the queue flashes green and the remainder are solid green. The chair will allow each flashing mic in which it will change to red. Only 2 mics on the floor will be red at any one time. If you wish to come back on a question, please leave your mic on, and officers speaking to the report, I would advise you do the same. Committee members will be given priority. I would like to highlight some good news to members before we move on to the formal agenda. And just before that, I'd just like to welcome Councillor Kenny MacLeod from Harris, who's the new Harris Councillor. So it's his first education meeting. So welcome, Kenny, and I hope we don't put you off too much. So thanks. Right, Laxdale School has been awarded gold accreditation by UNICEF's UK Rights Respecting School programme. The Rights Respecting School Award is granted to schools that show commitment to promoting and realising children's rights and encouraging adults, children and young people to respect the rights of others in school. Gold is the highest accolade given by UNICEF UK and shows a deep and thorough commitment to children's rights at all levels of school life. Thank you to Mrs. Ayrig and the pupil steering group who led the RRSA award in Laxdale. They planned, organised and led assemblies, focus days, and they worked hard to promote RRSA across the whole school community. The Nicholson Institute. The Nicholson Institute is re-establishing its Gaelic choir and has had an amazing turnout of pupils for auditions and preparations. They are now eagerly preparing to compete in the Royal National Mod, which has been held this year in Oban. School Nauru. School Nauru Choir were delighted to be invited along to the official opening of Eris Nauru, where they sang for Her Majesty the Princess Royal. The children performed amazingly well and were extremely excited to meet the Princess. Stornoway Primary School received the Gold Sports Award from Sports Scotland. This award recognises their commitment to creating a culture of excellence and inclusivity in physical education and sport across the school. The anti-bullying ambassadors have received their second badge from the Diana Award. This was the inclusion badge, which was awarded to the ABAs in recognition of their work in promoting diversity, inclusion and equality across the school. Leverborough Memorial School. Primary 1 to 3 and primary 5 to 7 were both successful in the Pocket Garden Design competition. The primary 1 to 3 won the Beta Bournery a black house with a maca roof, along with bee-friendly plants. And primary 5 to 7 came in third place with Biast and Clorval. They used plants of different colours to create a woven pattern. Scholar Garlic Medium 4 to 7 performed and won first place at Mod Used with their drama Creacta Mute Inkio. Following the success of their win, they were invited to perform at EDF on the Briar stage. They will be performing at the National Modern Open in October, where they will hopefully have further success. So that's good to hear. It's good work going on in the schools locally. So that's great to hear. So where do we get to now? Yeah. So I'm ruling items 5 as urgent. Items 4 and 5 will be taken in private at the end of the meeting. A reminder that the meeting has been recorded and will be made available on the caller's website following the meeting. So we'll start with the minute of the meeting of the 18th of June 2024 for approval. Have your approval? Anybody want to say anything? Bring anything up? Okay, thanks a lot. Declaration of interest. Members are asked to declare any interest that they have in any items of the agenda. It would be helpful if members express why they are declaring an interest in the items concerned. Members in the chamber, please do so by pressing your mic or remotely through Teams by using the raised hand button. Does anybody have any declaration of interest? Oh, Kenny. Yep, Kenny.
Yeah, Chairman. I sit on the CLD steering group as a community representative. I know there's a couple of reports coming up later on.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thanks. Cheers. So, if there's no more declarations, if you have another declaration, at the item, just repeat it, and we'll just make notes of it. Okay, at the item concerned. Right. We'll now move into item 3, which was performance management. This report provides an update on performance in local government benchmarking framework indicators relevant to education, skills and children's services, and to set out performance against improvement targets. Mr. Neil MacLeod will speak to the report and answer any questions. Thanks, Neil. Cheers.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, the report just highlights the improvement activity and indicators that were identified in June 2021, and they were related to literacy and numeracy, school attendance and exclusion, and also looked after children in the community and looked after children with more than one placement. So these were the key areas that were identified. Paragraph 5.3 indicates here the ones that were agreed and the improvements that have been made, and paragraph 6.1 to 6.12, they highlight the trends in performance over the past number of years and also identify the improvement activity that's taken place. Progress has been positive on the whole across all of these, and Appendix 1 lists all the relevant indicators under the local government benchmarking framework. Happy to answer questions, but there's colleagues here if there's anything specific for the indicators.
Okay, thanks a lot, Neil. Thanks. Does anybody want to ask any questions? Who comes on? Who's going? Councillor Francis Murray's on first. Yep. sorry, she beat you to it. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah. I think it is quite significant that at 5.1, when you see the local authorities that we've been grouped with in this family group, because you might have assumed we'd be grouped with the likes of Orkney and Shetland, but in actual fact, when you see the list, we're seen to be similar to in terms of relative deprivation and affluence. They're what you would think would be some of the poorest authorities in the country: Dundee City, Glasgow City, East Ayrshire, North Lanarkshire, Inverclyde. So I think I think that's important that people are aware of that. That's how we've been seen in this exercise, because sometimes we are compared to other parts of the country which are perhaps more relatively affluent. So I just thought it was important to make that point.
Okay, thanks. Ray, did you want to put your mic on at all, please? Right. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Chair. On this particular report, I was going through all the different things, but one of the things that stood out as far as I was concerned was 20 school exclusion rates per 1,000 pupils. And obviously there's hope for improvement over the next 3 or 4 years. But particularly the point I was interested in is, where do we exclude to? Because it's, if you're in Glasgow, you know, you pass the buck on. But it's more difficult here. I just wonder. I've got a second question after that, just a general one. But
Okay, that's right. Okay, Doc.
Wel, thank you, Geest. Ha ogni de chwyr ymach ysgol, ha red di sy'n chwyr as y fel yn ogri hyn. So'n cwtch go ogri ha defain taik fo garrison agos sheriff sy'n yla, ha Michael Furlum, ach cwtch de hyn chwyr yn yla ha exclusion y tachard, so'n gachi go parent yn y fysad y dol. As ni fiachin gymwr, so'n liadach ys tort iras arafyn, clown y domach as a scholar son exclusion agus as yn gobile Canarton Arts Culture yn gyharad i'r as is on lechig doin agus garas yn yw'r son taik o hort y goelli yn ymach as a school. As ni fiach yn cydioch di lesach yn o fat sa had ymach as a school cydioch.
That's it. That's it.
yeah, I actually missed the very beginning of that with this gadget. But maybe you could just summarize the first part of what you said.
I'm dili. Wel, sy'n gael hwgal ni sy'n diolch o'r corum at yn tri sy'n dyn y ceidiwch gael sy'n gael am eich leid yn cast. Dyd fam i cantyn sy'n ha a nu di de seiwch as y fel no gli hang yn cwrdd as y sgol. So'n cwtch go gri a ha dili dys yn a lac a gyharad cian sy'n nyfer fan achal at y sgol a sy'n tor taich gaif tor doi yn Jeffreyja le garrison y chwrla ti'n Michael Sgol agos garrison ala o comparstach is a hacking so'n taich gyhort y goi gri. So'n cwtch go gri a ha tachard so'n gachi so'n lan ag sy'n y tachard a chafi sy'n y tachard tric so'n cwtch mwy gan hyd so'n ysyn tor taich dy goi gri le garrison agos comparstach is a hacking le bwyn yn a ti'n Michael Sgol.
Yeah, the point I was making that from the geographical point of view, you know, I understand what you were saying about taking steps in that sense, but that we can't just send somebody to Inverness or wherever, you know.
Chafi sy'n gan hort effala fan yn Eilean each brin exclusions as a seiwch a sio son is on law smaid da law ymach as ysgol chafi clawn yn chanafis gael clawn ymach as ysgol son baroch gys tri law ag ynawn so she exclusion gymaint garage sy'n yw brin as clawn yn ymach as ysgol son smaid law da law tri law agos bys ni'n gwybod cwngri son sy'n chan sy'n yr iafod seiwch fan chwysyn cwtch gan ymach as ysgol lawn yn
Thank you. My second question is in the sense of performance review. I think that's just looking at the actual term, performance management. Now, this, I may be told just now that it should be policy and resources, whatever. But there's nothing here about Stornoway Primary, and I would suggest that we have an item on the forthcoming agendas just to see what the progress has been made with that particular thing. Now, does this come under P&R? Because normally it would come under education.
Channeil gnoich ag yn aich gysori togolwch sy'n opera fel yr ard yn ysgol stiornafach, byn ysgol stiornafach, ach sy'n tolis gilior aich gyhort gan nas eich gan y chomiti, ys o'n fysau hot y feil par catch fel yn togolwch adols deis eich as y fel as yn ard ys i ennilis. So ffyrir sy'n aich gan nach chomiti ys o'n sy'n.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't expect this particular report to cover the Stornoway Primary, but it's not on the agenda
Yeah,
at all, so
yeah.
I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Right, thanks. So if there are no other questions, no other questions. Do members agree to the recommendations at 3.1? Thank you. Right, so we'll move on to 4 and 5 are in private and they'll be for the end. We'll move on to item 6. Item 6, which is foster care fee rates. Mr. Jack Libby will speak to the report and answer any questions. This is seeks approval for an increase in the fostering fee rate. Okay, thanks, Jack.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. In 2016, Children's Services introduced a 3-tier fostering service with separate fees for each level, with each level being dependent on carer skills, experience and qualifications, with expectations the service has in terms of type and level of care required for any particular child. When the scheme was introduced, there was no agreement on the frequency and level of future increases to the rate fees were paid at. Again, when the scheme was introduced, there was a lack of clarity surrounding foster carers offering short-term breaks and respite care and continuing care, where the young person comes and goes from the placement, i.e. the young person is studying on the mainland and returns home for holiday periods, as an example. Again, when the scheme was introduced, it was intended that level 3 carers would continue to offer their services to children's services, i.e. working within one of the various projects, for example, the extended learning resource or the children and families team. Again, there was a lack of clarity in terms of what the exact ask would be of foster carers in terms of time commitment, and carers themselves are making that ask of themselves. We have calculated this based on the increase in fee based on the salary of children's service support workers workers to be 22 hours per week. The ask would be of foster carers should they have no placement at any given time. The value being that increasing the fee and regularly reviewing the amount the fee is paid at will assist with foster carer recruitment and retention. The recommendations are, given a length of time, that being 8 years, without any increase to the fee, we should increase the fee by 10%. The rate of fee should be reviewed every 2 years. The retention fee would not apply to foster carers offering short break, respite and for continuing care, and that level 3 carers should, if they wish, continue to receive the fee beyond the 6-week retention period to provide on average 22 hours per week to supporting children's services. And the proposal is all within budget. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Jack? Seems pretty straightforward, I think. Oh, okie dokie. If there are no questions, anybody? Oh, Councillor Norm MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, for letting me in, and thanks, Jack, for the report. I think this highlights again what we mentioned, what we had at a committee meeting last week, community safety, where it was brought to our attention that the lack of provision we're making, but with our own budget cuts when it comes to providing on island services to help the social services department deal with children who may end up in mainland placement, the cost to the Comhairle. And I can go back 7 years to when I first came onto this Comhairle, when it was being mooted that we do something on island for this. The cost here is £2 million for 2024-25 between one budget and another. You know, the costs are astronomical.
Can I just stop you there? No, is this related to the fees? Because we're going to have it. That item's coming up later on in the meeting, and I just wondered if we can leave it for then.
Well, it's not really relating to the fees. It's just the overall provision for care. I mean, I can leave it later on.
Yeah,
if you
we'll
want.
bring it. We'll bring item
Okay.
5. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Is there any other questions? Okay, so if there are no other questions, do members agree to approve the recommendation at 3.1? And shout, don't shout. That's all right. So, yeah, okay. Right, we'll move on to item 7. Child protection national minimum data set. This item relates to the child protection national minimum data set, and again, Jack Libby will speak to the report and answer any questions. Thanks, Jack.
Again, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform members of child protection activity over the previous 6 months via the National Minimum Data Set template. I'm going to, well, I believe this to be an excellent report, both by its rich array of data, but also helps explain the increasing levels of activity my staff are contending with versus services that continue to be making efficiency savings. I want to go to the key findings from the data. It's a complex report. There's a lot of data contained within the report. I apologise for that, but I think it's well summarised in the key findings section of the minimum data set itself. So it's clear that given the small numbers involved within the data set, it's hard to draw significant conclusions from the data. This limits us to detecting large differences between reporting figures rather than some of the nuances contained within them. There is a significant increase in children who are subject to police court and child protection concern forms in the last quarter. The number of children subject to interagency referral discussions, as we refer to them as IRDs, remains consistently higher in the last 3 quarters, with the number of IRDs taking place increasing quarter on quarter. Excellent attendance from all agencies at interagency referral discussions. There's a dip below the national target for SCRA decisions within 50 working days, attributed to a number of factors, but mainly we'd attribute that to the increasing workload with our stagnant workforce. We continued with 100% of parental attendance at child protection planning meetings and core groups, and that's encouraging in terms of staff establishing positive working relationships with parents in what is often very difficult circumstances. I am happy to take any questions, Chair, and again, I appreciate that there's a lot of information and facts and figures contained within the report itself. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so do members agree to the recommendations at 3.1? Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to community learning and development, item 8. And this report at item 8 seeks approval for the publication of the Community Learning and Development Partnership Plan 2024 to 2027. And Ms. Fiona McInnes-Begg will speak to the report and answer any questions. Thanks, Fiona.
So I'm here today with the next iteration of the Community Learning and Development Partnership Plan. I'm obliged to come every 3 years to committee with a new iteration of the plan to set out how we intend to make improvements within communities with the help of our partners. So we've obviously got regulations in place that require us to create the plan, and the plan has been brought together by a very active steering group who of a range of different partners who have participated and led in terms of discussions and sharing information. So the plan, the appendix is very weighty. However, there will be a summary version of it that will come to other when I'm doing other updates on the plan. I think it's what's happened over the years is there's been greater buy-in from both partners and communities as we try and set out our the key priorities for the way ahead. So we've aligned it to the COLA strategic plan. So we've got 5 key actions and we've aligned that to the 4 corporate priorities that the COLA have. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. Does anybody have any questions? Nope. Okie dokie. So do members agree to approve the recommendation at 3.1? You. Right, we'll move on to item 9, which is Young Scott Partnership Performance Update. This item provides an update in relation to the Young Scott Partnership performance and and again, Ms. Fiona McInnesbeg will speak to the report and answer any questions. Thanks again, Fiona.
So this report sets out the partnership we have with Young Scott nationally and how we benefit from that partnership. All young people, well, we've got 89% of young people in the Western Isles now have a Young Scott card, which is it's regarded as a national entitlement card for, it can be a proof of age card. It allows them to access discounts locally and nationally, and there are rewards if they use their card in certain retail premises. I suppose what's critical for young people in the Western Isles is the travel entitlement now that's aligned to the card, where there are free bus travel for all young people, and I think that's made a significant difference. And when we think of the poverty agenda, it definitely assists with that. So along with the report, there is an appendix which is created by Young Scott nationally, and it just gives us the breakdown of how young people are using it in the Western Isles. Obviously, we've got there's a Gaelic element to the Young Scott, and we've had a fair amount of views on that in the Western Isles. They do specific support for young carers, and yeah, I mean, it's a positive report to consider. We get an annual insight report from Young Scott, and it just shows that there's currency with the card and with the initiative.
Okay, thanks. Does anybody have any questions for Fiona on the Young Scots? Who's first? Councillor Norrie, Thomas, you beat him to it. Oh, he got in ahead of you. Oh, you did well there.
I suspect we're possibly going to be asking the same question.
Okay.
Caledonian McBrain. And ferries. Our youngsters, we're an island community, and our youngsters rely on ferries much more than anybody from the mainland central belt of Scotland. So I mean, I think we've lobbied for this before. Can I ask if there's been any update on?
So young people get access to 2 free ferry journeys in any 1 year. However, I was hoping that the new CalMac booking system was going to allow recognition of the Young Scott travel element, but alas, it hasn't. So if you're a family, I know I should be talking about the positives, but this is definitely a drawback. So if you're a family and you're going to travel on the ferry, you've got some of your children who are eligible for their free ferry journey. You can only book on the system, you can only book for those who are not Young Scott travellers. So we are canvassing hard for a change in that. But obviously with the new system that Caledonia McBrain are using, I had assumed that when we moved on to the new system that Young Scott card users would be part of the eligible discounted, but no, they're not. So we continue to seek support for that to happen for young people in the islands.
Yeah, thanks for that, Fiona. Can I ask that this committee and this Comhairle continue to lobby Caledonia McBrain on behalf of our youngsters for this concession? Because obviously with their board being so full of island-based luminaries, they will realise the value of this to the young community.
I'll do that. Thanks, Norrie. Is there someone else got a mic on? Yeah, I'm trying to get it to take, but it won't take. Do you want to switch off your mic, please, Fiona? That's it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Maybe Ocean was in ahead, was he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Ocean was in ahead. Let Ocean go first. Aye.
The situation is, of course, it's not up to Calmac, it's up to Scottish
Trans-
Government and Transport Scotland. It is part of the Fair Fares review, which we're expecting shortly. There have been encouraging noises, and the Comhairle has written what feels like several dozen times on this particular issue, which really, people on the mainland who travel by buses, have gained significantly on this, whereas we as islanders who use ferries more than buses with our limited bus service are disadvantaged. But we have I think, as I said, we've written so often on this and discussed it at so many meetings, without making much progress so far. But we have an encouraging, I suppose, report back in terms of what's going to come from the Fair Fares review. So, but it is an issue that's up to Scottish Government and Transport Scotland, not Calmac.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that, Ocean. Ray, Councillor Ray McKenzie.
Thank you. Yes, well, surprisingly, my question was not the same as Norris, but I hope these representations come to something because, yeah, it's important. Just to say that the scheme itself is a wonderful scheme, and it's very positive that nearly 3,500 young people are getting the benefits. My question actually is to do with, I think was it 89% of the young people are taking advantage. What's happened to the 11%? Is this? Do they not want to take part? Do we know why 11% are not figuring in these statistics? Is it that they don't want to, or they can't, or there isn't enough publicity? I would have thought that's not the case, but have we any idea why the remaining 11% are not beginning to do it?
I think our understanding is that for some families, it is about understanding the benefits. So if it's not immediately obvious what the benefits are, then it's not something that they want to do. I mean, we try and encourage the young people at key transition points in their school career to have access to Young Scot benefits. So, for example, we go into the primary sevens and make sure that they're aware before they go into first year what the benefits are. I think the national entitlement card element of it can sometimes be a concern to families about what that actually means. So maybe it is about us explaining better the benefits, but I think the uptake that we've seen over the years shows that people are understanding better what the benefits are. And I think the transport elements, we tend to get a rush of people looking for Young Scot cards at the holidays, before Easter or before summer. So we're obviously hopeful that we'll be able to encourage more folk to take up the offer. I'm not sure what else we can do at this stage, but there's always more that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, 89% is a very high total. I appreciate that, and there's always going to be an element of that people just don't want to take it up. But is there any possibility of giving it more publicity in that sense? Possibly on the local media outlets or something that the council could just highlight the benefits.
Thanks. Councillor Francis Murray, did you want to speak? Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention there. Thank you, Chair. I was recently at a meeting with councillors from other areas, and they were, in some other areas, they were discussing, I think what they had already done, which was they were replacing school transport with, people just young people just using their Young Scot cards on service buses, and obviously that depends on there being a service bus. And that was obviously a saving in some areas, and I just wondered if any thought had been given to that. On Councillor Mackenzie's point, I suppose looking at any scheme where it's voluntary take up, I think 89% is quite high, but I suppose my worry would be that it looks as if the people in quintile 2 are less likely to take it up than quintile 3, and these are the ones that really would be benefiting from the free transport, but maybe they're not travelling about much, and they don't see it as a necessity. At the other end of the scale, maybe not everybody takes up what I like to call the old Scot card. If you're not travelling much, perhaps you don't see the benefit of that. So it is, I suppose, it's a matter of choice. And when I say that, I'm not being disrespectful. I have one myself.
Has that been looked at, or do you know?
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that they're useful comments, and we'll certainly take them on board and see if we can progress any. But like I say, at this stage, 89% for us is a positive, because we were less than that, in years gone by. So there's definitely been an increase, a significant increase, I would say, in recent years. So we just need to keep doing what we're doing and making sure we're reaching out to those who we think would benefit.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. Thanks, John. So if there are no other questions, do members agree to note the report? Thank you. We'll move on to item 10, which is Volunteer Centre Western Isles funding. Item 10 relates to the Volunteer Centre Western Isles funding, and once more, I will ask Fiona McInnes-Begg to speak to the report before I open up for discussions for any questions. The Fiona show, I tell you, it's become right. Thanks,
momentarily. So this is another regular report that I bring up for your consideration, and it's in recognition of the partnership that the CLD have with the Volunteer Centre across the island chain. So the work that we do in conjunction with the Volunteer Centre is significant. We do lots of recognised, I've lost it now. We do lots of recognised youth awards in conjunction with the Volunteer Centre. We do volunteering, yes, see if you look at page 3 of the report, that's what we've completed this year in conjunction with the Volunteer Centre, or rather what the Volunteer Centre has delivered with our assistance, I would say, because obviously they're an entity in their own right. Youth volunteering has been developed and supported, and obviously through the work that we do with the Duke of Edinburgh Award, then we require volunteer placements for young people. And once looking back the way when COVID arrived on our shores, it was very difficult then because everything stopped, it was very difficult then to re-engage local businesses or local agencies in terms of working in partnership with us to provide volunteer placements. So that's now on the rise. We've got the Saltaire Awards in terms of a recognised youth award for young people. There was a number of young people received their Saltaire Awards last year, and the Volunteer Centre have their own youth award as well, the Callanish Youth Award, and that went out to 290 young people. So we continue to, where possible, work in partnership with the volunteer centre, and they are a key agency on our steering group on this, and they were part of creating our CLD plan, just to link in what I talked about earlier. They look for a grant of 22,000 from us, and that is covered in our own budget line. So we obviously see a huge amount of benefit to aligning ourselves with the volunteer centre and the benefit it brings.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. Does anybody want to ask any questions about that? Or do you want to? Councillor Ray Mackenzie.
Sorry to come in again. I'm not, obviously the money is there in the core funding, but I just want to say it's a fantastic organisation, and just that's really, really all I want to say, because they're doing a great amount of work in the community. And we hope that more people would volunteer.
Okay, thanks, Ray. Councillor Francis Murray.
Thanks very much for the report, Fiona. I just wondered if there's anything that we as a committee could do in terms of publicity, because obviously noting all that they do, that's been done on the back of a falling number of volunteers and a sharp decline in volunteering, not just here, but everywhere since COVID. And I think 6.7 looks at some of these issues. Is there anything we could do in terms of publicising the need for volunteers? We spoke about this at the Community Safety Board too. It's so important to have volunteers from the community, and many people have been volunteers in the past, and perhaps negative publicity about young people, which sort of permeates, and you can understand why in particular situations, puts people off, and it becomes a cycle. And because people are nervous about volunteering, then there are fewer opportunities and things happen that make them more nervous, and so it goes on. Is there anything we can do as a committee to talk up the work of volunteers, to talk up the need for volunteers, to talk up the benefits of volunteers?
I like the way you've asked that question, and I'm the only one who switched on. So what do I think the committee could do? I think, obviously there's a volunteer, we've got a volunteer policy within the council, and very often previously we would have been able to take full advantage of having young people in the building taking on particular roles. I mean, we've got a very healthy modern apprenticeship, so that's slightly different though. What I would say to you is that for volunteers, we need to have the support structure in place for them, because there are people who are very, very willing to become volunteers in particular agencies, but if we don't have the correct support for them, because they're not a member of staff, so we have to be clear about what the restrictions are for volunteers. But there's nothing better than a happy volunteer being in and amongst the work that we do, and it would be great to see the Comhairle doing something with volunteers. So
Okay. Right. We'll have to have do you want to speak, Donald?
Aye, more an taid, waarschijnlijk. Am ik eindig is je lokale hoort, Fiona, as a frakkerdek. Could you ask Michael Cormac in your aste, go per lische skippy in the mean and heen. As you tira eindig in you have nog eens, because in daar take arrogant, reach gonna moeien, show, I guess, get in. Dit ik in die jaren keer tradition koppel in de mean en is on vissige germach, I guess, pute Cormac had chien thrown up at a show.
Okay, so we can maybe look at doing that, Donald. Yeah, to see if we can do something that way. Is Ray coming back? Is he? Okay, Convener, sorry.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a question. I mean, the service level agreement between the Comhairle and the Volunteer Centre started on the 1st of April. Why is it 6 months later the report is coming in front of us? This report should have been in front of us possibly in the last financial year, not 6 months into a service level agreement.
So I'm working on the assumption that last year's report was late. And so I'm trying to stick, I'm not trying to stick to a late schedule, but I do it in conjunction with the volunteer centre manager. And we, in terms of their reporting, this is a good time for the, you know, as they do their reporting, it's a good time for their, I suppose, their accomplishments to be recognised as per their reporting schedule. But I take your point.
Okay, right. So that would that to look to be changed in the future then, what do you think? Or we just that's something we'd have to
If
look
it's
at.
the wish of the committee,
Yeah,
then
that's
we
something
can
we'd have to
change
look
it.
at. Yeah, that's something we can look at, yeah. Okay. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, having said I wasn't going to say anything, but you know, this whole discussion comes back to the fact that for some reason, some reasons are pretty obvious, but for general reasons, there's less volunteering in the community. And this is a big problem. I think you find with almost every organisation from the length of the islands, throughout the length of the islands, that you know, there's less and less people willing to come forward, or you find in some organisations that you know, the age of the people that were doing it 50 years ago are still doing it, you know, 50 years or 40 years or whatever on, and there aren't the number of young people coming through. Now, I'm bringing this up as an obvious problem, and I don't have any answers to it. But it's just very unfortunate that this is happening throughout every organisation, I would say. Whatever part of the island, I would imagine, the islands, and it is a major problem. I don't know what the answer is, but it's there, and it'd be great if somebody could come up with some great ideas to encourage volunteering.
Okay, right. Thanks, Ray. So if there are no other questions, do members agree to the recommendations at 3.1? Thank you. Yeah, we'll look at that, yeah. Yeah, okay, yeah, we'll add that, yeah. Okie dokie, right, so we'll move on to educational provision. eSchool Annual Impact Report 2023 to 24. This report details the eSchool impact during the session 2023 to 24, and Mr. Stephen Graham will speak to the report and answer any questions. Thanks for
Martin Bahad. Amitolch vi seo cólar a veniu, Sean Ahish gíscoil chud third. Mar a híisiú ha op íscoil a thientain, sin gopad rí cólaí imimeach buan. Gus tíich corm in a hort ga clown ag gachide sas gach coirsneach a fag alabe. Ahish glionach íscoil Sean a bblionna da vile fiche sa céhe de scélig as nógvias agus a hyperlink chuna Ahish ga sin yn hos na Ahish ga seo. An sin, Joshi Immerig, na had vi gáil áte, had is het nimmedoch program again, agus geharad buai hug sin skaladen agus skolchen, chynne vain seo as na Helen and Siar ach fag alabe. Mi geharad sin nade harik go inavas. Hishu as a narne appendix, ma de ha tjakisteach de chabor ga million note ag ísgol. Had is de blan inavas da vile fiche sa 3, fiche sa céhel. Gaich chabor million note jenne sin a choske seo as na Helen in jaar. Had is den céhed blionach a seachet ha ísgolet chabor 8 million note hortesteach agus jenne sin gaich 3.6 million note a chosk an seo heen. Agus hishu as a cheru appendix man an aragad sin a kamal kostnig ri moran as na cóisnach hín agus mana sinna cúr rééis an economíana dar cuideach. Sin raasta gopad an an hóbháin le bhíaltas na halappe, gus upadolochi a dhéanú thoiseach Academy Disidach náisianta út den noch an na manifesto Party náisianta na halappe an da bhíle fiche sa hin. Sgéidig imimeach chom a bhí an thois léasacha ga seo chan bhain ga díosclach gan na chóla héin cuideach agus sin núil is an áchas tóca le táíon nópad a has a dí dhéanú chuna seo agus thuirtadard agus a chud bunáid hesfach sean in naimrí teach. Bechilm tainge hort ga offic ar in na cóla agus ga péin mar bhail cuideach gus ar taich ar cuideach hadéis sin na blianachan agus ha mi núl gan gáisiúí sin nahéis go seo agus ha mi gomaidúnach questions simi a hagu ar agart in nahéisc. Taflah.
Thanks, Stephen. So does anybody have any questions? Councillor Donald Crichton.
Tablet ní carach an mína na ma bham gan committee Committee taig hort an weis kréim op sonne askis kur faaltje er seo a smeerfoljoch a seoir chuú chos leis a cóla harisna bliorsin is hat taig a fógan tonna hélannen a is kuteoch mú economicoch a heg an opera seo gan hélannen kuteoch so dúch Júri tor tainka is a skipig a gískal. Is beásin gájanju mar chuna bhí go mar prásol is son an opera seo ha lesochu is hannig ik steach gosonitje ag gaim COVID a tor taika fáum as na hélannen tron an aimar sin. A cha mi gúrdiach féinnig am meistar gréamach ma dhéin i hu an opera international bheisiú haas de tábach is steach buinen international ag Júri Gaelic fáum Gaelic jansige.
Ha sin neachchan chaid ha sin bríine den international an thoiseach ha sin fáilteach iad teacheran a Sína agus sin núil go mí trúdhiú a gopad adar íscoil scoilmhic neachgal agus bin scoil stearna a cuideach agus channe Gaelic a bhís channe le seo an Gaelic gaiimeach ha mi núlke gnne Jackan ba an Gaelic gaiimeach a gaibh at sa hat a seo cólarein. Ha bhúdbag de golídas an a bhí tort chom ga daine tú muich a lappe an Gaelic gaiimeach is teisttenas a hort gaibh tron an SQA ha bacha a chud a daine sa mí tú muich na halappe ba vi si na diachan a sin gohofikel. Chan je lever an sinnach begad nam haarst de glas vi gemisach agus súla gerí na qualifications a sin hi ach sin dinge sem mi ga janu tú mu na halappe chanel choach ag gníide a choú man nach chúis gus injachan hi. Man a mi tuigs ha de incentive ga hart leis a bhíaltas hu cosca sin agus san ga mu na halappe héine had gaiken. So ach na mí nanig garach go sin no nanig exception i dhéanú sin na Gaelic a bhain bhí sin gomátálit fáiltecha a daine sem mí a áte sem mí gus Gaelic a a cólarein ach man híisiú as a chógiú appendix ha míon agus iad is mu sin an an choirsnach in na halappe channne bhain inhíh ach an na sscoiltin cuideach daine ha géirí chom Gaelic gaiimeach barach gan amach ma dhéin húltarach in hín agus as a bhórchuid de sscoiltin ardscoiltin na halappe channeal chomach Gaelic i dhéanú mar chuspad agus a sin fiochan rí sin leisach trona bhí tarteachchat na cuasaí na sin. A sin cuideach tart chom ga clán an na munscoiltin na halappe sos de taster sessions an sto cha is siach ganin gefagad blasad dhénach an is fi sin núlsan áchas go gyn horsich sin fod i gynonta fydd ag at y dyrd sad y dyrd nid y sad y chorymstoch y cwsich yn i enw as yn ardsgol no gjaraf nid y sad na'n nynafich agos gymiad i geri y gaelig ag o'r dyrd yn ocean.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks. Councillor Dom McSween.
Tapelaf agus tíoch mar a chuú ggólacha Crichton tíoch fáideach a náisce seo agus go háte fistrach mí dhéine náige tá tunneisteach gan an economy. Am sigur cheiste hakams na rád sé ha söl ac yn iaddarachach fo fa Covid an agus mar ha sin teams an hos a sin mar farst gan nopath láithiolig mór an. De fel sinned bua i hort eth ískol gyfel korm ag skoltjenelle, kolenelle, innetanelle, in sjors rute livrige nu vel seise riarige gyfel gyrwysio fattad hosioch gylior son lenting ad vi sadavachal.
Ha mi gori si fod ha si gra agus a mi smynach chanel cael yw ras fod asin i gianu chanel cael y laib fod asin i gianu nach edrych deniele iachin ach a mi smynach ag man a si gra gyfel sin iad hosioch ag cach ha anamig i gysgol ha cialich yn y gysgol ha daif adar sin agus y fioltas chai y hosioch ag a mi cyd hadde sydd am gysgol cor y si ablion fo hosich sin agus a sin i sin togalad yn y cialich yna sin agus yn y cora yna sin gus janu caintoch gysbyd Davis at hosioch goin gymi isgol na farst de gysbyd yn y planig yna hegi fioltas a sin barach coram yn y hort ga deinioga effeg na halabe. Ha fioltas gyma mochal yn opad a sin i gianu ha sin i coniach ag rhyw nid y fa trig gus aheisgyn agus fistochig agus fiwsat af am isio iniu a mi ddimil an o'n fioltas i geri fistochig y farach nopad a sin i gianu le clawn nach ylydd chorym y gol gan ysgol. Ha fioltas gar am ochal yn oegri nach ylydd chorym y gol gan ysgol trwy mi chylydd typlodyn einsion agus typlodyn slange ele agus had y sianske gynobri sy'n colarw gus fwyd i gynnych ydy doi gaif y fys siesfach y fys y gwybod colar yn ysgolchen agus offi garin an Comhairle chan je fain sioach a chyffag alabe gus corum a hord gaif chan je fain chestyn ys an ag eich an hawl ach golod as an o fytyn y fi gawsachig y fi chan je lo hyn ach y fi nam harst de choens noch y blaene agus sin yn nŵl sy'n ochus gyffaiad a ddas gan ysgol la chorigen ach y gol rys stonach bysyn carst gan y chwldiniag ach a dynnu moch alyd yn opad as yn gianu agus gyda mi gael gyda dynnu cwjoch y mionach y pysio a'n gai pein cwjoch agus ydys sy'n gyma ta'n gael ysyn yn haig agus yn cwjoch ag ha Comhairle y hort gain had ysyn y blionach yn agus as sin yn nŵl sy'n ochus gylien sy'n y ddyrd.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Councillor. Do you want to, sorry, Don, do you want to come first?
Wel, mae'n diolch gyda tocl yn ard yr eich cwjoch chocwyd mas a anwper a isgol y gennym rast leis y realtas ciansti yn Academy Digitoch Nasianta. A mi tig sy'n rydw meistyn mexio yn y gra gael gwneud ywdrys yn unod sy'n mynd eisiau fi clech gyda garys yn technolas a hacus ond oper mar isgol har eisiau rioch ach se isgol yng garys a ffain yn haig taik aragyd agus taik ala ffon o realtas yr as sy'n gyrig yn y cainjach yn haim sy'n yng Nghial a nefi stage yn eisiau son har eisiau sia sech bliwne sy'n gen y cainjach gyffyrich isgol Jimmy Hill Award leis y realtas agus gyda isgol y ffracr da hag y realtas is son diadach eisach agus chacus digitoch har eisiau rioch gyr fat yr hic yn Academy Digitoch Nasianta.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Councillor Callum McLean.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mr. Graham, for that. It's a very informative report. It's got a lot of data in it as well. To take in it all is quite difficult for
for people like me as well, who are getting a wee bit cobwebs around the brains. But there's one or two questions I'd like to ask. First of all, is relating to 6.8 in your report, where you talk about iSchool and eSchool. Could you just, and first of all, give a little information? I know it's in the document, but in layman's terms, what's iSchool and eSchool, the difference between the two, first of all? Because I want to go on then to just what you were talking about there about school refusers. And this, my second question is about school refusers.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. I appreciate that the terms iSchool and eSchool may well cause a bit of confusion, but essentially iSchool is a subset of eSchool, which is all about including and reintegrating interrupted learners back into the way of learning. iSchool was initially an idea that was developed on a very much a shoestring budget here in the Western Isles pre-COVID, where we initially struck on the idea of reaching a young person on their terms using digital tools. For a lot of young people who have detached themselves from school, schools have tried all manner of different alternative strategies and approaches to try to get them to re-engage, such as a reduction in timetable, maybe support with a home link worker, and where all other approaches have failed, we struck on the idea of reaching them on their terms. And what I mean by that is we wouldn't insist on them having the camera on, the microphone on. They would join the learning from home, being part of a live, interactive digital community. But with all the anxiety triggers removed, we would then look to get them back into the way of learning, and hopefully over time bring them back to a place and a space where they would feel willing and able to engage using the camera, microphone. And since then, that initial early offer of maths and English to a small group of around maybe 16 learners across the Northern Alliance, COVID was in many ways a grade leveller and rendered every learner in Scotland an interrupted learner. And it allowed for us then to tap into an additional funding stream that really allowed for us to grow and develop this. If we had every interrupted learner in Scotland on our books, we would certainly be the biggest school in Scotland. It's important for me to stress that any young person who's referred to us, they remain on their own local school roll. Our iSchool management team, they work very much in partnership with colleagues in schools. And at the moment, we've got upwards of around 160 young people from right across Scotland. I think 28 local authorities have referred learners to us, and a waiting list as long as my arm. If I was to advertise and promote the service, we would be inundated. We would raise expectations that we would not be able to fulfill. So it's no great surprise to me that it might be something that most people in the chamber will maybe not be aware of. There is a mental health crisis, or not just in amongst our young people, but it's becoming more and more of an issue for our young people. Anxiety, mental health issues, and what we find is very often young people just they refuse to go to school, and they won't. In some cases, we've had young people who join lessons from their bedrooms. They don't engage with their family particularly much. Curtains are closed, but I can think of one example of a young person who joined us midway through session in 5th year. She had a range of different issues to contend with, and in the time she was with us, over 18 months, she re-engaged with learning, got back into a routine, and gained qualifications that allowed for her to then go on to an access course in university. And it's all about early intervention, trying to reach these young people where they are, to get them back into the way of learning in partnership with their schools, and try then to prepare and support them in order to essentially become an economic contributor to society. It's a long game. I mean, that example I gave to you of that girl who went to university, it's not typical. It's a long, slow process, and it's the most rewarding element of my work. Seeing the difference we make, not just to a young person in that situation, but to the wider family circle, who are, you know, at an end of themselves, worrying about what the future will hold for that young person, who is not going to school in what ought to be the most formative years of their lives, and is not on a pathway that's going to lead to a particularly good destination. So that is iSchool in a nutshell.
Thanks very much. That's a very informative answer, actually. Yeah, because most of the problems, quite a number of the problems that I as a counsellor are getting from parents is that they're not engaging with school. I can give, you know, 2 handfuls quite easily on the number of parents that are coming to me, and they're not engaging with school. And you're right about the mental health crisis, it's massive. And I think that, for instance, in our own area here, for such a small area, there's a significant number of them. And these people are creating problems within the school that they're in. But the parents are saying to me that they're not accessing iSchool, eSchool. They mention eSchool. Can I another question there, Graham, is what age do they, because is there a misconception that you have to be 16 before you can access eSchool?
Our provision for the interrupted learners is from primary 2 to S6.
Yeah,
and I think it's important to stress that the provision is only going to suit an interrupted learner who's willing to engage with learning. And for those who are disruptive in school or in the wider community, it's not necessarily going to be the right solution for them. It's part of a package of options that's available to any school or school leader or director of education, perhaps, or the team around the child who would be able to make an informed decision. But for a young person who's disruptive, the last thing everybody else who's anxious and on the verge of engaging would need is for somebody to come in and disrupt that quite sensitive cohort. So I think it's a package of solution. It's one of a number of options available to a school leader to consider as to whether it be right for that particular child to support them to maintain their education. Sorry.
Yep. Thanks for that. The other one is to do with I see that your engagement with those who are willing to learn Gaelic, the promotion of Gaelic, I should say, both at learner and native Gaelic. I was looking through last night at the SQA data relating to presentations, both in Gaelic and Gaelic learners. And if I understand the data correctly, that's in 2024. It doesn't look good for the Western Isles, for Comhairle and Siar, I should say, because the presentations aren't what you would expect. Am I misreading the presentations of it? I'm just saying that would I say that therefore there's a need for the promotion of Gaelic, and I see you're actively doing that.
Just before the chief officer comes in, the Appendix 5 is only captures the presentations that eSchool have been responsible for. Our schools here in the Western Isles, they are very well off in terms of opportunities to study Gaelic, native and learner at all levels, I believe. And the only times that eSchool would step in there would be perhaps for a young person who maybe wanted to take another subject in the column that Gaelic was maybe timetabled in. So it broadens their options, but typically we would always expect any young person in the Western Isles to be undertaking Gaelic with their own local school with an on-site teacher. But perhaps the chief officer would want to say more on Gaelic presentation numbers in the Western Isles.
Thanks. Can I just get you to put your mic off, please, Callum?
Sorry.
Mór an tegus an chéist agus am céintcha is de se clá sé sinna has sin hína fi an cuideach gas na Harbhan sin ir scrúta go dhéanamhir Haris na diachin na chaig goáil am líúna sé bríseach dúla an gaine ficin na Harbhan adal trí son diachin an gleicha can an Gaelic. Agus cuideach go hárad loch gausach Gaelic farafel na Harbhan tornaslugin a bhesin súlachich. So nuad a súling go gra rast hasin hína sin ícin as na Harbhan acin agus hasin mar ha cannach le ceannart in na hardscoiltin acin agus tógáil nuliad is a seo agus a gurfi gobar cónlarú is an liatacha dhéanamhir na Harbhan hatal trí fá jiffer íran at atal tron an hardscoil son go le a féin an héistin is a sart súri gaif. As a chan an héin, new a clechke an hanan on an cúspar an eile.
Okay, thanks, Donald. Okay, so I think if there's no more questions, do members agree to note the report? Councillor Macaulay, I missed you. Sorry, I always miss this. That's green light. I must have blind when it comes to green or something.
I'm hiding right in front of you. Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. But I was just wanting to be a bit more. It'd be a very detailed report, but I'm looking at the income. 1.5 million received, 6.4 from the live element of the national e-learning and additional from the Scottish Government. I was going to ask sort of which parts of the live elements, but I think you perhaps answered my question partially by your answer to the last question. I assume part of that income is coming from the iSchool. But my question is really, is this just to explain exactly where that income comes from in a bit more detail, and in your own opinion, is it going to carry on growing? And you know, where do you think we could be maybe in 1 year or 3 years with it? And the other part of the income I was going to ask about with the graph, and you know, how much of that local income is staying on the island, or does some of it go off the island? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Macaulay. Ever since the COVID-19 pandemic, eSchool has been tasked with delivering what's known as the live element of the national e-learning offer. Originally, that had 3 elements to it. There was a live element, which was delivered by eSchool, the supported element, which was delivered by Education Scotland, and the recorded element that was delivered by West OS, which was an online school that uploaded recorded lessons governed by the West Partnership, WIC, in the Greater Glasgow area. Since then, eSchool has received funding year on year and has been able to build on the legacy of the work that was done during the COVID pandemic. So the bulk of the income, the funding that eSchool draws down is that national e-learning offer, and that's what funds programmes such as iSchool for interrupted learners, the study support provision that has just actually started this week, which is for senior phase learners in S4 to 6. It also supports a raft of other smaller programmes for early years and some for the broad general education, and there are various other bits and pieces to it, but the main elements would be the iSchool interrupted learners provision, study support, and also developing the young workforce live. Now, in addition to that, eSchool attracts funding through Gaelic specific grant that pays for a raft of Gaelic initiatives and programmes that we run. We this year have drawn down funding from the Cora Foundation for a project we're doing with respect to the UNCRC being added to the statute book, where we're actually working with Gaelic medium learners across their own schools, as well as a number of other groups of young people who are perhaps at risk of not having their rights and entitlements met. Now, in addition to the funding we draw down, The bulk of the other income is generated as a result of what was originally eSchool's core business, which was delivering supply to schools across Scotland. We're also drawing down funding for delivery of Gaelic national qualifications as well. So the pie chart you see in front of you, it's the bulk of it is made up of funding, income derived from funding, and a smaller portion is income that's generated as a result of eSchool services being sold to schools and local authorities. In terms of what the future holds, it's difficult to say. I think I know at the moment that study support is going to be running in the next financial year, and we are looking to port some of perhaps the work that we're doing at the moment to sit under a national digital academy, and the work that we're doing with interrupted learners may well move to a pay-per-seat model. At the moment, it's been running as a pilot where a lot of learning has been taking place, but it's not a model that's sustainable to scale up, because as things stand, schools and local authorities are funded for educating young people. And if that young person isn't going to school but is instead with ourselves in a separate funded program, it's not something that would sit comfortably to scale it up. So I think there's certainly a desire to build on the work that we've done, but to move it to a more sustainable model. And that's a conversation that will be taken to the Association of Directors of Education in the near future, if it hasn't already, because it's a countrywide problem, and I think we need a countrywide provision in place to meet the evident need that's out there. But it's very difficult to know year on year what the future will hold. But as things stand, I can say that the government are interested in the work that we're doing, and I think that's a good sign. And it's not never a comfortable place to be when you're operating on a year-to-year financial model. And I think if we can put things in a more sustainable 3-year, 5-year cycle of funding, it'll allow us to plan with a much greater degree of confidence and allow for us to hopefully better meet the needs of young people across Scotland in partnership with schools.
Right. Thank you very much, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Right, so do members agree to note the report? Thank you. Item 12. Thanks, Stephen. That was really comprehensive. It was really good. Item 12, report by Care Inspectorate of Early Year Learning and Childcare Provision. Item 12 provides information in relation to the outcome of the caller's early learning and childcare settings engagement with the Care Inspectorate and His Majesty's Inspectorate of Education Care Inspectorate joint inspection visits from June 2023 to June 2024. And Ms. Carol Burns will speak to the report and answer any questions. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you. The purpose of the report is to provide members with the outcome of the inspections that have taken place since June 2023 to 2024. Some of our settings have been inspected, have had individual inspections by the Care Inspectorate, and 2 of the settings incorporated within schools have had a joint inspection from Care Inspectorate and His Majesty's Inspectorate of Education. So since June, 5 of our early learning and childcare settings have been inspected by the Care Inspectorate. 2 of our local authority nurseries were jointly inspected by Care Inspectorate and His Majesty's Inspectorate of Education. 1 partner provider nursery and 1 childminder have also been inspected by the Care Inspectorate during this time. The outcome and the gradings of which are detailed in section 6.1. The full reports are also available to read on the Care Inspectorate website or Education Scotland for those that had the joint inspection. Settings are inspected against a set of criteria. For the Care Inspectorate, they looked at how good is our care, play and learning, how good is our setting, and how good is our leadership, how good is our staff team. For the HMIE, the His Majesty's Inspectorate of Education, these were the following quality indicators that they looked at: learning, teaching and assessment, securing children's progression, leadership of change, and ensuring wellbeing, equality and inclusion. So from these inspections, where support is required within settings or recommendations are made for improvements, the early learning childcare settings are required to create action plans, and Care Inspectorate will do return visits to ensure that these recommendations have been met. So we work closely with the inspection areas, mainly the Care Inspectorate, not as a critical agency that comes in, but as a supportive measure. So looking towards that, we are ensuring a commitment to providing high quality early learning and childcare within all of our settings. The inspections are a really important part of our quality assurance process to assist us in looking at self-evaluation for self-improvement, with external agencies coming in with fresh eyes and giving us their input. Following the recent inspection, improvement plans have been implemented in collaboration with the Care Inspectorate, the management teams within the settings and the staff teams to identify the requirements and recommendations that have been made to make those improvements, and we continue towards working towards positive outcomes for all our children.
Okay, thanks, Carol. Does anybody have any questions? Norrie, sorry, Cam, Norrie got in ahead of you. Norrie.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report, Carol. We spoke about this previously at the last meeting of education, the vital importance of childcare. And this is probably a question for Don MacLeod. We know that childcare is a huge issue across Scotland. It's not just a local issue here. And there have been attempts to alleviate the situation, which have probably only made the matters worse by introducing legislation that's kind of onerous for those tasked with looking after children. We need adequate childcare across the Western Isles to sustain our populations. It's one of the things that cuts across a couple of our committees: sustainable development, education, not the least of them. Donald was good enough to come down, Mr. MacLeod was good enough to come down to Point to have a look at our own setting and the issues that were highlighted by parents there as well. Some of these parents use childcare in Point and in Stornoway. They have to move across to get the childcare that they require, but some of them were having issues with getting back to work because of the provision that they couldn't access. And we were hoping, I think, across the piece here, across the Comhairle, to see if there was anything further that we could do to help with the childcare provision within the strictures of budgets and everything else that we've got. I was wondering, Donald, is there anything to report on where we are, and is there any progress being made, and can we help further? I won't point out the difference between North and South here. I would like to see maybe what Dalabaran used, Scolari used, that you are doing, that maybe we're not doing further north. That was the obvious thing that struck me here. But and a report on where we are and how we can better support childcare, if we can better support childcare, because it's vital that we do so going forward. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to support the childcare provision for all the parents of the Western Isles who are seeking to get back to work and have their children looked after as well.
Thank you so much. As I'm going to issue the hash gra. I can see me again a committee of a show again diction seminar. I can screw the giroch in Husper, Kurim Klanya. I guess hashin giroch a genu opera ras the genetical son seminar hashin. I guess I'm in August Gnoshin, Corum the Veil, Brian Harris in Husper is fat. Listen, I hacking in you, son Mayen Kurim Klanya is son Clown Gaharajish 3 go coig has na agus na garas nas ni goper connery ach na cúspen han jevi in an art geharat for parenten for charlich agus as nes vi kanjoch mar a sin gra moien we hies an a ski an roe agus boien an elle sin je korach sé en nu is geharat son charlich le oikri for Joni go 3 agus a gemak natuurlijk agus hoper aken is een fiken dé soring an a chorle Janus an teike hort gan na boeien in sin agus vi goper an a komparstiges le boeien in elle son liatachig na garis in na haun agus mar se gra se kusper economica han kujoch en jiach kusper fallum sli gaine ras son sin sé vi connery Cody officern agus beil an a seminar is on go Harris in húsper fat agus a station chom hort eisgur aschan committee seo is on fiken vel kalile soring in Janu stage is on teike hort de heerlich Harris in helen agus liatach geharat kurum chláine son éisian Joni go 3. sé kus betuige haun ha kusin invis darf gan chorle agus féimsin kuch vi fekelch dé noper jemes a chorle ennu ré staat agus dé noper Giori jennes an teike hort gan choiers noch ger fat bi fige tjene gachar me jene seminar ha mi brien agus bi sin an a frakker an Njoret is a hannig van committee me jerech en Siar me an a committee has show.
Okay, thanks, Donald. Councillor Don Crichton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. Thank Carol for that report. The improvement plan implemented in due course. But I think we're all using this opportunity to segue into the wider issue of childcare. And I'd like to support Mr. MacDonald in the sentiments he has expressed. There is a childcare crisis. Along with other colleagues, I attended a meeting with parents in Stornoway recently. Mr. MacLeod also attended, and we heard firsthand of the problems and issues faced by parents, which is having a really negative impact on our economy, and to such an extent that some parents are considering leaving the community to seek better childcare and better career prospects because of this issue. So it is becoming a crisis. I would hope, as I mentioned to Mr. MacLeod at that event, that some of the findings, the testimony of those parents, that they make it through into our committee system, maybe through this seminar, and to further reports. But I think there has to be a wider partnership working for the COLA, possibly with our community trusts, and see what kind of provision could be created or provided in those settings, in a rural setting. But it's certainly an issue that's coming to us fast and furiously in terms of the negative impact it's going to have on employment opportunities for parents, and also the negative impact it has for our wider economy. So I would hope that we can use the findings from that event to consider at our seminar as well going forward, and try and develop a strategy to address this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Johnny.
Dúach is an frakker de chuir chunne sin a mé Europe is a chuir gan moeien na steich na canju in na storne weg voor geen sechen kaltia keras. Ba mé kin gan canju in sin agus hannig tore machas of some grosje pein could just vacuch de veide lang lásin could just chole sin. Tor fissig of a pan to me in a duliet is in a hack. Harris kurum chlanir fat agus chaitor skrive genu na canju in sin agus fissige hort hele agus dúach is an fissige hasnir nior dis a christechan a bhuiin sin son feine fissige chaie chrulig agus frisin sin te hele agus krising an a seminar kujochka sé kutermach gewoon sé korm va van kleintjin Harris na buin an Jeffrey just na chos noch gun dé na duliet is in a hake agus as Giori sin nach lechtig agus frisin tronne system sinna.
Okay, thanks, Donald. No, yeah, I think Councillor McLean they read some with Francis. I think it's actually gone the wrong way around, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Just Councillor.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Apologies to Councillor McLean if I got in first. One thing that strikes me, and I believe there might be some discussion around this, and I just wondered if there was an update on it. It must be very stressful for leaders in an establishment when they have two different sets of criteria to be reported on. So you've got your four key questions on the care inspectorate, but if HMI are coming, it's four different ones that you look quality indicators that are looking at. Is there any progress on streamlining these two sets of indicators?
Not at this present point in time. That has been looked at because, yeah, you're right, it is a huge set of quality indicators, you know, that the early learning and childcare settings have to meet. In comparison with the schools just have the one, which is the HMIE, but not as yet.
Yeah, Councillor McLean, do you want to put your mic on? Yay, Councillor.
Thank you.
You're in.
One of these days you'll actually look this way.
No, I can only deal with the mic as it comes up. It came up red with Francis first. I can't change it.
Again, thanks, Carol, for the report. Just there's one thing that does come out to me when I look at the table here is that I don't know where Little Treasures are. I'm hoping they're in the north, but I don't know where Little Treasures childminding is. But anyway, what seems to come out here is the factor is how good is our setting, and out of the 7, 3 are adequate. And then you've got another 2 goods and only 2 very goods and 2 goods. There's something obviously in that needs a wee bit of more explanation. The other thing that, and I endorse what Councillor Crichton has said about the provision of early learning is an absolute necessity within our islands. One of the other things I'd like an answer to is staffing. I know in our local early years, there is a difficulty in staffing. I'm sure Mr. MacLeod does that. You'll agree with that. There is sometimes a changeover of staff. I don't know, maybe Carol can allude to this, but certainly within the early settings that I'm attached to in my local area, there is a turnaround of staffing that's, you know, it's not as in other areas of learning as it is in the early years. Maybe there's something. Am I picking up something that's not there?
Hang on a minute, Carol. Can someone just who's got the mic? Can you just switch off your mic, please, Angus? I'll pick you up and thanks.
There is, yeah, in some of the settings, there is, you know, a turnover of staff. And we have had staffing has been an issue, and it has been a difficulty in recruiting to posts and getting people into posts. We are looking at growing our own staff team in terms of, you know, the trainees and the modern apprentices that we've got coming in. But it has proved an issue, and some areas more than others more challenging to recruit to some of the positions that we have. Some posts have been out 4 and 5 times. Yeah, it has been. And I don't know the answer to, you know, to that.
Yeah, the other clarification is how good is our setting? What is it? Can you clarify the setting? Is it the building? Is it the area they're in? Or
some of it is to do with the area they're in, and for example, you know, Balavanich, that is, they are in one of the difficulty that we also have is with the FES buildings to what we can provide outside, because again, it's limited to, they can't have certain things that are required. Loose parts is a big part of children's play and exploration outside, and settings have been told that it looks a mess, but it's actually, so there is, you know, some things that do impact on, you know, on that, and that's something we don't have control over, because the buildings don't belong to ourselves.
Okay, thanks, Kel. I think Salida was next.
Thanks very much. Been a good discussion. Thanks very much for the report. Just follow up on Francis's point about the streamlining of inspections. Is there something we could do possibly as a committee to put a bit of pressure on government to ease that? Maybe a letter on behalf of the committee to take that forward. And the other thing, just to touch on the points that Donald and Nori were making earlier on, I think the childminding, it's not just enabling people to go back into employment, it's also an employment opportunity as well. And I think if we're going to be looking at community benefit from renewables and the likes coming forward, I think childcare has absolutely got to play a part in that to enable the workforce to get back into work. And we've got to see childcare as, you know, it's going to have to be subsidised. We're going to have to be supporting it in some way. And if there's a funding scheme that can allow us to do that, I think that's exactly what we should be doing.
Okay, thanks, Leader. Do you want to come back?
I'm just being in case Janik polish the rest. Ha cormac in your rest keistich chun realtas ma yen scrutiny ha scrutiny can't rest is mille film nashenta dal trona realtas rest the cricket fiach near yen education reform agus ha Weibchen had the curie achre genu is scrutiny skull how to mach buin fel malapa as vi station an in east agus ha corm sin putig ma yen scrúte a tachart cean sé cuam chláine channeal garas na suchas a mí har is cála a féin scrúte scrúte cuam chláine féin agus sé dulé is a sin ba paper ac bheit sin joint inspection framework bheit bheachan í opbrachig go ach channe sinne fiken sin genu jiffer sem mi haast a scrúte a tien agus a hat da je ver boeien het isteach oren ik ne la ik in naim het er bechken jiffrich séige kurum chláine sin go dulich geine hat dulich an hofikern hat dulich an lochgo proch hat dulich a parenten tiks de tachartliche service so am hines me be ma soing kan du gin ene tro committee is on puta go bhríaltas ma dhéon scrúta go tachart is cuam chláine rast. Is ar sin je brion na dúliad is an daine hart isteach go opar cuam chláine go hárad daine mar childminder an opar a hacar dhéanú son rical ire scrúta go seo hacar daine dhé agus chan rid maithe sin.
Okay, thanks, Donald. I think Angus was next. You don't want to come back, Carol, did you? No. Your mic's on. Carol, your mic's on, yeah, that's it. Did you want to, okay, Angus McCormack, Councillor Angus McCormack.
Thank you very much, Chair. Excuse me. I notice here that single words are being used, you know, to describe an establishment. I can't see how that is in the least bit helpful. And it was a significant issue, of course, in England. And the authorities in England are planning on changing that situation. An inspection of any establishment should be supportive and helpful. And that's my own memory of these from the past. I think had Her Majesty's Inspectorate got together with the mathematics department of the Nicholson Institute at the time when I was there and told us that we were adequate, he might not have left the room. That is a really damning thing to say to anybody. I mean, these people are working very, very hard to achieve high standards in their facility, and that word is used. It's just not good enough. I would rather see inspections indicating, as they do, positives and negatives, but I really don't see how this single word helps in any way. And I wonder, are you aware if there is any move nationally to get away from this idea of putting a badge of some kind on a school with a single word? It just doesn't sound to me as a good idea at all.
Ha mi gyndach yr eisiau da si gra, agos ar asta, mae'r bryn mir yn hysg mae iere, ha byled yl tron y realtas ar asta, mille ffalwm nasianta, a sŵlach achar hort wy'n sgrwyd i sgolgyn. Ach, gada ha am wy'n hen fi fi gaharach sy'n hyn trwy'n macha ffalwm alaba, chan il cael yr gra has mae i'n sgrwyd ych hen, ni fi tarte e ffala na sia facil nes i a pwynt gyda hacer mesych sgolch yn yr as teacher. Y fa nadulitis yn y tachart system sassing hannig y ffysig hyn a'ch rhaid i enw arach mi yn alab yr as le eisiau system had y clech is on mesych i enw i'r sgolch yn.
Chair, may I ask, would it be appropriate, the leader has already suggested that we might make representation. Might we make representation on this particular issue too?
We'll make them both on them. Yeah, that's fine. I'll write letters to both. Yeah, it's not a problem. I think there was Ian McLeod was online. Did Ian want to come back in? Ian McNeil, sorry. Okay, Ian McNeil.
No, it's fine. It's okay. It's past now. That was a long time ago.
Okay. Oh, tell me about it. No, I know it. Tell me about it. Right. Cheers. Okay. Thanks, Tama. So, do members agree to the recommendations at 3.1? And I'll write and see if we'll get how we'll get on with that. Yeah. Right. So we're now moving on to item 13, which is a report by HM Inspectors of Education at Skolbal June 2024. This item details the outcome of the inspection at Skolbal and the Scolari by His Majesty's Inspectors from Education Scotland and the Care Inspectorate jointly, ironically. Okay, and Donald MacLeod will speak to this report. Thanks, Donald.
Am diolch gyda tosgu gra gymi nach bwringa medicleinig ferrig ysio fi cwnlar yn yw yn laher hai raster yn lli so as ystion ag yn eachel so cha bwrin fi yn laher nioed yn laina yn yw so brin mi hun ysio nasg agos fiach mi ar cystion yr acad maswringu sio as gytort ffysach y fael mae un sgrwyd eich a enwyr sgolfal y fanig neu betrai y safliwna as y ypling hannig sgipi a ffyrdd malaba nech sgrwyd i sgolchyn agos sgipa ffo nech sgrwyd i'ch cwr ymchlanio sgrwyd i'ch cwnlach gyharad i'r sgolarich cwnlach agos le eisiau fynd sgol le nech sgrwyd i sgolchyn. Chai as gysgrifech asjau gai fi as y sgol chai chwylach as y nog fias agos fa tort ffysach eich mae un pwynt yn iarst y sgol agos y sgolarich agos o bylias chi hacer i iannu sy'n ardys i iannu. Haes gyda yn aes catort ffysach eich na pwynt yn iarst eich ai hwgal o nech sgrwdi agos na pwynt yn nes chi hacer i ardys i iannu leis yr eist y clechgych na sia ffacil na sia pwynt yn yr rwysyn i brin na betrai leis ffysach eich o nech sgrwdi sgol le na ceir pwynt yn y fad ysgrwydych hwyrad ma on y tri iaf agos fyr fa on yn un gyda se sgrwydych ma fa sio as on y sgol agos fa sy'n cymryd tolet synichyn. So on y fyn sgol fa as on y sgolarich bachor gyda fa cwch dy gwylitis na chai hwgal agos se na y fesig y hwyriad sy'n se grwad riarich le tri agos yn fad siwrach o fe ma, especially as yn aes gyfacin na betrai cydioch. Leis nech sgwrwyd y cwr mychlania, hygiad sy'n biech na ceir pwynt gyna ac y hyn, agos fad gyma ffasg yn y biech leis dy hwg nech sgwrwyd i sgol. Agos hygad ma, dy tri gan y cwsbyrn agos mae'r fysyd y gra mac y lior, fyson ga ala friar each. Ha sgol yn eisiau fi gober conori offigaran is on plana y enw is on urdys i yn y pwynt yn y chai y hwgal is on nesach i as y sgol agos adr yn operation y horsach is adr glarag taich fan y bail yn yw is on yn operation y enw. Ym tolig cystion y record for bail mae un naisg.
Okay, thanks, Donald. Is anybody, Councillor McLean, I can see you this time.
Thanks very much. You're brightening up. Chair.
I'm waking up.
Yes, it's just a comment really on 6.2 in the report here. There are bullet points. On the second bullet point, it says senior leaders and staff should raise further children's attainment. This is a recurring factor, a recurring theme in inspections in Western Isles schools. And I'm just giving just my own, take it for my own opinion, talking to teachers, to staff members. Staff members are swamped. The teaching staff today are swamped with what I would call peripheral factors. I think we're more interested in other factors outside of learning. Certainly, I would say out of learning, that is out of gaining attainment. And I would say that we really do need to reassess where we are in teaching, because as I say, it's having an adverse effect upon staffing, the morale of staff as well. Because teachers want to teach, but I know that the director has to obey, how can I put it, what has been governed from above. Right? These are all within Scottish education system. The system is governed to do certain aspects of learning, as they call it. But I think there's an overemphasis. I don't know if Mr. MacLeod will agree with me. Maybe he can't say it here. But overemphasis on some aspects of the curriculum with an underemphasis on attainment. I see it in young children today. Parents are telling me today what their children are learning in schools. And to be quite honest with you, if you go back 10 years, and here is a dinosaur in me, 10 or 20 years, they were far, far more advanced in their literacy, numeracy in particular, than they are today. And I'm just saying that as a factor that we should be looking at. And I know that we're only a small element in the Comhairle and Siar, and we have to be under the umbrella of Education Scotland. But it's a recurring factor. I don't know if Mr. MacLeod would agree with me.
Well, irid a chanin ar seo sé sin hín georí sa dhéanú goharis le attainment a sin ní officer úr hort isteach a gobert díroch ar an húspar sin héin haris sin na scoltin aking. A chud ha dúlich a scoltin agus an útra sinnadal cúideoch sé a tór cúitim sin ar cúitgan ar utan ala ha chimichil ar curriculum a scol. Agus gohara just a scrútach bheit seo an a scol fel a vanich. Hoig 3 hin ensuring well-being, equity and inclusion. Sin ferfel tór gan ar utan ala sich ar a hat a scrútach a scol. Agus we ar a scol sa 4 bhaid an sin. So ha dúlich ha tór ar a húlach a scoltin agus fel a menu. Agus a cúitgan sin ha ma cútarmach ar a bheits an díoch a blian ma dhéin sláint eintin agus cúspar mar sin ha cútarmach sin tar taichan sin cúideoch ach féim sin such an hína tics go féim sin súil gear a hort at attainment agus sin never has ní tart ar a hort of a gerúristeach a gobal díoch ar a sin.
Okay, thanks. Angus, Councillor Angus McCormack.
I thank you very much indeed. I can introduce one of my hobby horses here, if I may, Chair. I wouldn't want to be a teacher today, to be honest, and I loved being a teacher when I was a teacher. Despite that, whilst I was a teacher, I spent a significant part from 1990 onwards till I retired, fighting for a reduction in class sizes in Scottish schools. And to this day, there has been no reduction in class sizes in Scottish schools, and yet more and more is expected of our teachers in the education of our pupils. I too have concerns about the basics in schools and primary, although I am no expert in primary education. I would have been a dead loss as a primary teacher. I have the greatest admiration for primary teachers, but my belief is that children benefit from having time with their teacher. That is what really is the challenge. And my challenge as a teacher was to assess the pupils in front of me and then not teach them as a class, because they aren't a class. They're all different. There had to be an element of class teaching to it all, but then you differentiated and you attended to each individual's needs as best you can. You can't do that with the size of classes that there continue to be, and you can't do that now because of all the added pressures that are placed on teachers. They're asked to do more and more and more. And I understand why that is the case. They are the professionals. They are the ones who understand the children best. They can deal with the situation. For example, a huge change that took place was the moving of ASN into, if you like, ordinary classroom situations. That didn't exist in my time, and I don't know if I would have been able to cope with that. That seems to me to be a huge imposition on a teacher. So question is, do you think that maybe this authority should be getting in touch with the Scottish Government and suggesting that what they really need to do if they want to improve education is reduce class sizes, give us more teachers? And Chair, at the time when we were deciding the budget for education, we decided to cut £500,000 from teacher staffing, which I objected to at the time, but I understand why it happened. But we shouldn't be doing that. And I think perhaps Chief's Officer has said since then that the government won't let us do that. And I can understand why they won't let us do that, because we desperately need more teachers. But unfortunately, because of action taken in terms of education quite recently, I think Mr. Swinney decided that the 2,300 extra teachers that we were going to employ, we're not now going to do that. You know, we're going backwards. We really do need more teachers. That is the answer to this, and reduce class sizes. Lecture over.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Francis Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was actually going to come in on the same point as Councillor MacLean, but from a different point of view on that second bullet point in 6.2. My reading of that about the attainment wasn't that it was in the school, it was in the Scolari. And I attended that seminar in Stornoway too, and a lot of the parents there were saying they wanted to know that their child was safe and rather than how they were getting on against first level curriculum for excellence. So I'm coming at this from a slightly different angle. That level of attainment measuring is perhaps something that's putting people off working in the preschool, working with children in preschool. But this leads me on to something I was going to say later, but I'll say it now because I think it's pertinent. This report is on Scolbalavanich and the inspection report, but we're all using it to talk about other things that are important to us that lead into this report. I think there's a need for us to have a seminar on education so that it's not related to one school's attainment or one school's inspection report. We tend to do this whenever there is an inspection report in front of us and we talk about the curriculum or class sizes or ASN, and these are all really important issues, and I think they would benefit from being discussed away from the heat and light of an inspection report. So I would like to ask that we have a seminar on education, as we've had seminars on in other areas, and fully discuss these issues rather than, tacking them on to the report on Scolbalavanich. And I think Scolbalavanich should be commended for the report, and that's maybe getting a wee bit lost in all the other things we're talking about.
Okay, thanks.
Dúchas an Cage, bheis an nána point an sia point go son ceantlí classic in fog go céhir as a bhún scoil sin hiad íre an a curriculum for excellence so sin classic go classic céhir as a bhún scoil so chan ní scoláriche bheith sin a déala as a sé sin ach sin ras go an céist me on seminar hín tolit sin istéoch hín tolit cuideach go le baile an sinna céideach go mich cúsper ha cutermach réise nar bail sin trí gan a seminar sin ha corman acin go a gain corm brian cúd gan a cúsper na drúd nach bé an a cohexa scóil agus cuideach géidir sin hartesteach nu a tachart gnáisianta rast agus brian cúsper sa mí bheit baile giúí me dhéon fála mé fat so géidir mis coúí sin Euratas fá van bail me dhéon seminar.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's not a problem. Okie dokie. So if there are no other no. So I'll have to switch off the mic. When Norrie's mics come on first, so let Norrie speak first.
What do you say?
Yeah, you go first. You speak, and the mic's not live.
No, thanks, Chair. Yeah, and thanks to the contributions from other members. I mean, it's become fairly obvious, I think, over I don't know how many years now, that the difficulties within teaching have been highlighted, and I would imagine we're not the only authority who are highlighting that getting it right for each child is one thing. Inclusivity and equality is one thing. ASN incorporation within mainstream is a laudable aim, but are we really taking into consideration the effect it has on the teaching profession? It's difficult enough for teachers just now with large class sizes to deal with a complex range of requirements when composite classes made up of all different ranges of abilities. Surely every authority is facing the same difficulties that we're facing. And as was highlighted by Councillor McCormack before, reducing teacher number is definitely not the way to go forward. But when we're faced with balancing a budget and we can start to formulate and cut X amount from our education budget that can be used to balance the books, whether we like it or not, and we didn't like it, we grabbed it. So I'm sure we're not the only authority. I think Glasgow were talking about getting rid of 400 odd teachers to balance their books. So the situation has been forced upon us that teachers are becoming less and less able to cope with bigger class sizes, which is not the aspiration I don't think any education authority, or certainly Education Scotland, have, yet it's been forced upon us by stealth. You know, I'm pretty sure that representations, I'm sure the leader and the chief executive through COSLA have made the same representations. So at what point does Scottish education not understand that what they're doing in the round, the overall picture, you know, we're looking at making budget savings to balance out books, and education is one of the targets, and their aspirations are to have smaller class sizes, yet the economics of what they're imposing upon us make it unlikely that that's ever going to be achievable. So we're hamstringing our education department with what our aims and ambitions should be for our children, what Education Scotland's ambitions are for all of our children. And at the same time, the net result is every year it's getting more and more difficult for teachers. You know, I mean, I understand. I was never a teacher. We have several teachers who are counsellors now who have been in that situation, and they're all expressing the same point of view and the same principles that we're trying to apply to a situation where, at the end of the day, if we can't educate our children properly, where are we as a society? You know, the whole thing is becoming a matter of economics. And I don't know how many times I've said this, when we introduce economics and accountancy into the equation, we know the cost of everything and the value of absolutely nothing. And all we're doing here is damaging teachers and damaging pupils. And the net result at the end of the day will be more gerrymandering of the figures by the Scottish Government tell us we're all achieving more. Well, in reality, we're not providing anything near adequate education for our children. Our teachers are battling every day, and what they do produce at the end of a term or at the end of a pupil's school life is incredible, given how hard it has been for them. And we're instead of making it easier and a class from more of a learning environment, we're making it more of a reporting process than an education process. So, I mean, I think our representations to the Scottish Government through COSLA should be, and I'm sure the rest of the authorities throughout Scotland probably have the same perspective on this. And I don't know at what point the Scottish Government will start listening properly to the case we need to make.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So who was next? Councillor.
Can I-
No, sorry, let you finish.
Mae'n ti'n rhaid i'n cael hort erin hwsbar chai efrin y da hwydys nis mae un arf yn teacher yn yr efo sy'n gopr yr efo sy'n yfliwn y chai ydych eich gymachor gan garag y genwyr arf yn teacher yn as y chwrle a chai gyn y naim gydroch canig y realtus ys jech le Lítar mae un innovis is on teacher yn y farwch agos mae fe sy'n ar arf yn teacher yn y iarech mae'r fe sy'n sŵlach eich fe sy'n barwch yn fes eich hawl na fe sy'n saflach tron y proses y fe sy'n chai ydych eich gymach sy'n cymal arf yn teacher yn ymliwn ac yn y iris y fad yn ydw agos chan sy'n garag y ianwyr arf yn teacher anghwrach as dy tachar tro cosla tron y rioch gyr ffad le'n y hwydrys yn ynadol gylir mi un yn innovation y chien fan y realtus a sy'n has dy ffeis o'n gynnig ein dych tro cosla mae un sy'n y fi ar y ffag agos ni o'r ydys y chai chwyr hwydrys yn ynadol mae un camal arf yn teacher yn ac yn eid son glach ag innovation mae un sio agos ar hwnnw agos gynnig ach sy'n tirwch cael ei hortyd y seich eich rast a chanel sy'n teacher yn y iarag ymliwn o had ac yn eid y sefad yn ydw.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Donald. So, Councillor Ray Mackenzie.
Thank you. Don't know how I can follow that last one. Yeah, it's interesting to note that, and I think that should be noted by everybody, that we haven't cut any teachers. You wouldn't think so from what's been said. I hate to interrupt the teachers that have spoken, but maybe we shouldn't have cut the schools. That we did in the past. And I'm sure I remember a past chairman of education saying larger classes are better. And, you know, it's a complete contrast to what we're hearing today. But.
Okay, thanks, Ray. So if there's no more questions, do members agree to the recommendations at 3.1? And add the seminar, yeah, definitely add the seminar, yeah. Right. We'll move on to item 14, which is the Northern Alliance Learning, Teaching and Assessment Project. Item 14 provides information about the Northern Alliance Learning, Teaching and Assessment Project, the toolkit it has developed, and the secondment of staff to a delivery team within each partner authority. Are you speaking about Don? Who's? Oh, sorry, Peggy. Sorry. Welcome to the committee, Peggy. Well, so, Peggy.
Okay, thank
you. The committee. Thank you.
So the purpose of the report is to inform the Comhairle about the Northern Alliance Learning, Teaching and Assessment Project, the toolkit it has developed, and the role of the seconded officers within each authority. This is the final year of the Scottish Government funding to support regional improvement collaboratives. The Northern Alliance Regional Improvement Collaborative is utilising this funding to improve learning, teaching and assessment across our region. Inspection results and local authority data across the Northern Alliance are telling us that we need to improve our approaches to learning, teaching and assessment. High quality learning, teaching and assessment is key to improving learning outcomes and raising attainment. The toolkit is designed to support improvement activity as part of scheduled school improvement planning work. Using the toolkit, seconded officers are collaborating with schools and settings to target improvement across the identified themes. Through whole school targeted improvement activity, it is anticipated the engagement with the Northern Alliance Learning, Teaching and Assessment Toolkit will reduce variation and improve the quality of learning, teaching and assessment across our local authority. Data will be gathered at local and regional level to help monitor progress over time and to ensure that the changes made lead to improvement.
Okay, thanks, Peggy. Does anybody want to ask any questions of Peggy at all? Okay. Okay, do members agree to the recommendations at 3.1? Agreed. Thanks, Peggy. Thank you. Got off lightly that. You got off lightly that one. It's even through me. Right. Item 15. Attainment, Broad General Education and SQA National Qualifications 2024. This item relates to attainment, Broad General Education and SQA National Qualifications 2024. Miss Anne Graham will speak to the report and answer any questions. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm online, yes. And Face Comhairle for Lithuania, David Downham, QIO Secondary and Digital will also join me in sharing this report. The purpose of the report is to provide a summary to the Comhairle of attainment, performance and outcomes in the broad general education, primary 1 to S3 and senior phase S4 to S6 in the 2023-24 session. Paragraph 2.1 provides an overview of how tracking and reporting of learners' progress is undertaken. We have the annual teacher judgment survey of the broad general education. We have the Scottish Qualifications Authority, the SQA results, and also the Skills Development Scotland annual participation measure. In paragraph 2.2 details the teacher judgment survey of the BGE with an average of 86.8% of curriculum milestones achieved across numeracy and literacy combined in Comhairle schools for P1, P4, P7 and S3. This compares to 87.5 in 2023. Paragraph 6.3 provides additional information on the percentage change in attainment from 2023 to 24. And when observing changes in attainment compared to that of the previous year, there is evidence of important improvements across organisers and stages. For example, in primary settings, staff continue to raise children's attainment in Éisteachas Láhairt, listening and talking in Gaelic, following successful use of interventions to reduce gaps from the pandemic. Paragraph 6.5 also details important improvements in terms of children's attainment in writing, with 35% more learners achieving first level in writing than was predicted following engagement in a national improvement writing programme. And that programme is going to be rolled out across all Comhairle schools this coming session. Paragraph 6.4 also details an important note in terms of the cohort of learners. So the cohort of learners that attained an average of 76.2% in 2021 are mainly the same learners that achieved an average of 86.8% attainment in 2024, being measured at their next milestone point. So that indicates a significant improvement in attainment over time with primarily the same cohort of pupils. I'm now going to hand over to David and he's going to take us through the next couple of points.
Thanks, Comhairle, everybody. I'm just going to focus initially on the SQA data, then I'll look at the SDS annual participation measure. So across all SQA awards this year, the pass rate achieved in the Comhairle, Eilean, Siar was 81.7% from a total of 2,424 presentations. Increases in pass rate and presentations means that this year, more young people are successfully achieving more awards. And this year's results demonstrate a strong performance overall against a context of decreasing pass rates nationally in 2024. We record an increase of 2.5% in passes at National 5 and an increase of 5.5% in those achieving advanced hires across the Comhairle schools. There is, however, a reduction in the pass rate for hires locally this year in the context of an overall reduction in passes nationally. Comhairle schools will continue to undertake a thorough analysis of results to identify and address issues that contributed to the reduction of higher passes. This will include the analysis of insight data, which has been released this week, and individual secondary school attainment analysis and presentations. Following on from that, I'll just mention the STS annual participation measure for 2024 reports that the Comhairle has the third highest participation rate across Scotland at 96.8%. Furthermore, Comhairle schools continue to report some of the highest success rates in Scotland for sustained post-school destinations, with 98.3% of our leavers continuing to be in a positive destination in 3 months after leaving school, another increase on last year of 1.3%. I'll hand you back over to Anne.
Definitely, David. Our learner success goes far beyond the attainment data listed in the report. Our learners develop a range of skills and attributes through wider achievements, particularly with partnerships and successes with Film G, Mods, Fashion and Gale. We also recognise, as David shared, the high percentage rate of participation in the SDS annual participation measure and those sustained positive post-school destinations. Whilst there are improvements in learners' attainment across our schools, the Comhairle has identified correctly that writing in English, numeracy at P1, P4 and P7, and attainment in literacy and Gaelic at S3 as areas for improvement. Happily. We're happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Anne. Thanks, David. Does anybody have any questions for either Anne or David? Okay, Councillor McLean.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, I have a question to Anne and then to David. First of all, Anne, in 6.1, in your graph there, as you said yourself, there is room for improvement at P4. I don't know. I don't like to use the word shocking, but it's concerning to see English reading at 72.3 and then English writing at 71.4. Is there some underlying problem? If we've got this in P4, whereas when we go up to S3, we're on to 93.3 and 91.7, and even at P7 level, it's gone up a considerable amount. But this is, would you agree that this is quite concerning?
What we're looking at in 6.1 is a specific cohort of children. When you look at the primary 4 attainment, that is an area that we are looking to raise. When we compare their attainment at present in June, when they were in primary 4, with their primary 1 attainment, there has been a 10% increase in their attainment. So the interventions that the schools have put in place in terms of their listening and talking, in terms of their writing, have had an impact. However, we're looking now as a team at continuing to raise that attainment. We've identified targeted, universal and targeted support that we are going to take forward with our schools. We've held initial meetings with primary and secondary settings. We are looking to conduct achievement, attainment and improvement reviews across all primary and secondary schools. So we have identified schools needing those targeted interventions, and work has already started in terms of supporting those schools. And then we've got a universal offer of support as well planned out. So we recognise the attainment, we are looking to increase it. We've identified where the areas for improvement are, and we have got a clear plan moving forward for that. In terms of the S3 literacy and Gaelic attainment, we've identified gaps there. We have thematic reviews planned with the 4 secondary schools, and looking at how we can improve the progression pathway from the BGE through to the senior phase, and also looking at the curriculum, the design of it, and focusing how the entirety of the curriculum can raise attainment in literacy and numeracy. So we have identified what's needing done. We've got a clear plan in place for moving forward.
That's good. The other one is, David, you talk about the data, and I've mentioned this before already. Looking through the data for the higher presentations in the West, in Comhairle and Siar, I'm going to give you an example here, and if I'm reading it wrong, you tell me. For instance, the Gaelic learners, there's only 5 presentations for higher. In the Gaelic, there's only 25, and in Latin, there's 20. Now, maybe I'm reading. Am I reading the data wrong?
No, that is what the data is. That's correct. The uptake in Gaelic in both Gaelic learners and Gaelic medium has been a bit of a concern now, probably for a couple of years, and something that's on as one of our targets for moving forward to try and increase that. Unfortunately, like I say, it's been something that's been happening regularly, and it's kind of we're having to change the tide in that, and that's around looking at uptake, looking at attainment, looking at ethos of schools, and looking at how Gaelic's viewed across the whole of the council and in all of our establishments. So it's a big project, but I do refer back to previously when we were talking about eSchool, about there are some benefits in that within the council. We have eSchool providing so many opportunities for people to get qualifications in Gaelic, which is one benefit that sits alongside our school results.
Yeah. The other one I would say concerning is the presentations in English is 155, and the presentation in maths is 55. Again, is that a concern, David?
It could be seen as a concern, but it is actually reflected in the rest of Scotland as well. This isn't just particular to the Comhairle. This is reflected across the rest of Scotland. So there are other ways of looking at it. We do have apps of maths and maths as two different methods of working through numeracy and maths and getting qualifications. So that might change the statistics slightly from what you're looking at just now.
Yeah, I've alluded to this, and I'm sure Mr. MacLeod has already mentioned that you're looking at the data. I'm not going to go into it at all through today, what I discovered. Then when you take an analysis with a like-minded authority like Shetland, we don't compare favourably, and that's my analysis of the data. But I know that what Mr. MacLeod alluded to earlier today, I'm sure he's looking at it, because it is quite an eye-opener to actually look at ASQA data in relation to what is being achieved at Comhairle and Siar. So I'm sure there's concerns there.
And hang on, can I just get Callum to just that's it, cheers.
We gaan minister in een nagus per zijn nageest ga je nog raste gehaald de prien het punt Scotse kujak. Ik araf klasse keer filmje kujak keine wie in de haren en als je zo'n kanon björle zo'n girach is zo'n agri aan een film ter wie een björle han haren en als je ga wie agri aan een scholen aan een film ter wie een gaelic het een stech kon haren go klasse schech. So I guess kujak er kind nog mee in zijn ha Fawn naar scholen le dulite se mile canan biat on a film ter wie een björle. Gaan aviska wie aan een film ter wie een gaelic. I guess als je could bua in haren akin aan een klasse hin I guess klasse keer er darnel jegen o krias scolte nach las na harven. I guess kujok maar ga je grammar ha she Leona Jeffrey ha show van Leona ha vakin nu die spimsing al rasko ni David is een idea is on fiken caro aan een klasse hin. I guess ha er weer janu voor farro aan een klasse hin go farvel aan een klasse keer. I guess je should akut wacht om tokal. Het go na harddier en agus na diachan in Leona hasne kindige gro aarwen de kusper en Gaelic iosel storne bios na vashin giori sachne gen skruidle art sculpture me en kashona vashin na tachert ha de o creëer met was je pene tokal kanan Jeffrich gaan je honi Gaelic was de giori janu akide diachan in as na art sculpture as jy rechtlegig harisher de winskol achen is in kindige is en sachne giori kun je zien dus levitar torvarach tro diachan is fine chistinism aan maar we mikra na frakatone show en kanan heen kanan Gaelic heen agus klechig Gaelic het son chistinis nine on a kusper en elle kujok agus nevi seiche son torblion enkel torvarach genu diachan on a kusper biola na ha on the mathematics agus sin kiant die Marava chaig ra kujok had doin Jeffrey go tro na kusper in mathematics at na gana tri slíige de so kri golt son fein chistene on the maths agus kujus mus an tro kusper biala was had thought so sin kunne harven agus in suas na bevu.
Should come back?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
As just mentioned in the conclusion of the document here, I am concerned that it hasn't been mentioned, that the uptake in higher hasn't been mentioned. I see there's all to do with positives in the conclusion, and I'm not denying that there are positives in education at all, but there are, I would say, problems as well. And I would say that that should be in the conclusion, whereas it's not mentioned at all of what's there. It's just mentioned P1 to P7 and Gaelic at S3. And I believe that it should have been noted, because that is a significant amount of work that has got to go into that, I would say.
Okay, thanks, Cam. Councillor Francis Murray.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I would like to see added to this when that information comes through is the number of young people achieving completion of foundation apprenticeships, because these foundation apprenticeships, I've said this before, the word foundation, I think, sometimes has connotations of what was originally in standard grade, meaning the lowest level, whereas foundation apprenticeships just means it's a foundation to build on, to go on to a modern apprenticeship if that's what the young person wants to do. And they are at higher level. And some of our young people are taking these instead of doing a higher. They're over the course of 2 years. So instead of getting an award at the end of S5, that award doesn't come till the end of S6. So that means there's fewer people sitting 5 hires if they're taking an apprenticeship. And one in particular, the engineering, has to be done over 2 columns. So if a young person is taking a foundation apprenticeship in engineering, not only are they not managing to have 2 hires in 5th year, there's another 2 hires they could have had in 6th year. So I know we're encouraging people to take up the foundation apprenticeships, but there is perhaps an unintended consequence here that these are people who would normally be doing hires or who would have been doing hires before. So that may be having some suppressing activity there on the higher results. I think that's important. Unfortunately, they're not reported at the same time as the SQA because they're not SQA qualifications, and therefore you're not seeing that. And I think that is important to note. And also, as Anne mentioned in relation to the cohort in the primary attainment going into S3, it's also important to follow the cohort as they're going through from National 5 into higher, into advanced higher. So last year's good higher results are seeing an uptick in this year's advanced higher. Equally, last year's National 5 were poorer. So perhaps that goes some way to explaining why this year's higher are poorer. They are actually, they're the same candidates we're talking about, the same cohort. So that does have a bearing. Just in passing, I was travelling recently on a plane that was slightly delayed with our attainment advisor for the Western Isles, and he made particular mention of the excellent results in higher Latin in this authority and how that stands up throughout the whole of Scotland. And I think it's a pity if that then is seen as just something to make a poor comparison with another subject. I think that they are very good, and modern languages across Scotland have been hit in terms of uptake. Every single authority will report that.
Okay, thanks, Francis. Councillor Angus McCormack, I think, is next.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to thank Councillor Murray for her intervention, because that explains a lot in regard to the results from our schools, and it's perhaps something that we could emphasise a wee bit more in future reports. I've always felt myself this obsession with hires was not correct, and I'm very pleased that we have a variety of different ways of going forward from school education, and I believe too that the post-school education destinations at 98.3% of our leavers is possibly the most important statistics that we could possibly look at in our schools. Hires are not a be-all and all and end all. Going to university is not, you know, not everybody should go to university. When I went to university, there was 10% of the population went to university. Now it's probably like 50 or 60%. I'm not terribly sure that everybody should be going or looking to go to university. Go where it suits your abilities and go where you would like to go. Go and find the occupation that will satisfy you for the rest of your life. It doesn't have to be through hires.
Okay, thanks, Angus. So if there's no more questions,
About a poor comparison. It wasn't a poor comparison, it was an actual comparison. And the actual comparison is that Gaelic is significantly lower, as Mr. MacLeod says, than we would like it to be. I fully endorse that people should learn Latin. They learned it very well 20, 30 years ago. But I don't think I think it's an actual comparison.
Okay, thanks. So if there's no more questions, do members agree to note the report? Thanks. Item 16, collaborative review of additional support needs education. The report is item 16, details the process and outcome of the second Three Island Collaborative Improvement Review that took place in May 2024 as a partnership between Comhairle and Siar, Orkney Islands Council, Shetland Islands Council, the Association of Directors of Education in Scotland, and Education Scotland. Mr. David Downham and Miss Donna Murray will speak to the report and answer any questions. And who wants to go first?
I'll go in here just now.
David.
Thanks.
Right.
Thank you. Yep, it's me again. And I'll just lead you through the report, and then Don will be available for questions as well afterwards. So, working closely with ADES and Education Scotland, it was identified that the three island authorities of the Comhairle, Siar, Orkney Islands Council and Shetland Islands Council would form a strong partnership to undertake a review, recognising the similarities, cross-cutting themes and issues that the delivery of education in an island settings face. Senior officers from the three authorities worked with ADES and Education Scotland to identify an agreed focus on additional support for learning, ASN, and inclusive education. The overarching review question was, in the context of island communities, how well does the provision for additional support needs and inclusion engage and support the needs and voices of all children and young people, equipping them for learning, life and work? And there was three questions or related themes to help answer that question. How do we define ASN? What are our resources and how do we use them? How effective are our pathways for both universal and targeted learners? Following conclusion of the review activities, the lead senior officers from the three authorities have continued to meet to evaluate the findings and plan approaches to take forward the feedback. A summary of strengths and areas of development have been collated and recognised, areas where issues are common across the islands areas, as well as unique aspects relevant only to one partner authority. The findings of the review will be incorporated into respective national improvement framework plans for the next academic year. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Does anybody have any questions for David O'Donnell? Councillor Ray McKenzie.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I think it's a very important and a good report here. I think that there's built into the initial question, how do we define ASN? And I'm sure across the three authorities, it's good that there's collaboration between the three authorities. But I'm sure between the three of them that there's not any particular definition. It must be hard to come to a definition of how do we define ASN? What are our resources and how do we use them? Yeah, I can understand that. But first of all, you have to define the ASN itself and who comes into that category. So going through the report, I can see that it's a good report, and the findings, I've ticked just about everything there. I would agree with that. and I'm not a professional, obviously. While it's a good report, it also, as I say, on a more specific level, I would imagine, and I would like to hear, you know, what the broad spectrum, indeed, of ASN is, because, you know, with ASN there are a lot of different categories, I'm sure. What are the approximate numbers of, you know, in this council in particular, and who decides who needs ASN? So going back to the original question, how well does our provision support their needs? You know, once we've established who needs ASN, or what the, you know, what the quantity or level or numbers involved are.
Okay, thanks. Donna, thanks. You're
Hi,
on,
thanks.
you're live.
Live.
You're live, yeah.
Thanks for the question. When in this authority we have what we call the staged intervention process, an assessment process, and that places children at 4 different stages within additional support needs. But broadly speaking, a child with additional support needs is classified as any child that might be experiencing a barrier, any kind of barrier to their learning. So that might be something that's a long-term barrier or something that's a short-term barrier. So for example, if you have a child who is experiencing difficulties in the home, that could be that's detrimental to their learning and their ability to learn, that could also be considered an additional support need, but it might not be a long-term additional support need. Whereas you might have a child who has dyslexia, and that's a longer term additional support need. So in terms of what children are we talking about is a very broad spectrum, and also takes into account those young people who are care experienced, those with physical difficulties, those with cognitive difficulties as well. Because of that, the numbers, I don't have the exact figures with me at the moment, but the numbers certainly here in the Western Isles, but reflected across Scotland, of those categorised as having additional support need are very high as a percentage of our student population. And I think, you know, we've heard reference to the pressures that can cause within the system today.
Does that answer your question, Ray?
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, you know, the difficulty. So the numbers are very high, and that's obviously to do with how we categorize people in the first place. And, you know, as you say, there's, you know, a wide spectrum and different categories, you know, under ASN. And the other part of the question was, you know, do we have the provision? And that, I take it, you know, is an ongoing problem.
Yeah, I can come in here as well. So yeah, as you said, the numbers are high. And in terms of your question about do we have the provision, we, along with the rest of Scotland, have taken on board the policy of the Scottish Government that is the presumption of mainstreaming. However, we do have specific settings within mainstream settings that cater for children with very complex additional support needs. So we've got a unit in Sconaloch and a unit in the Nicholson and in Lernaklage. But I would very much point out that those provisions are very much part of and we would strive for them to be part of that school community rather than a separate unit as such. And we have many case studies and many examples of wonderful young people who are who have quite significant needs that their needs are being met within their mainstream primary school. And I think the teams involved in that should be commended for that, absolutely.
Okay. Right, I'm just bringing Donald here.
Yeah, I'm here with Gary Hinnis Jackson Frackard, back in Varach Visser in the Harvin, hacking you as Ogri family in the Varach. Ha Garrick for Blion and Gabliona, Ogri Hinnis Jack, I guess a fall off in the Sculpture, I guess that's as in your Jenny. No translation. No, I was just to clarify to Councillor Mackenzie then that.
No, can you come in, Deline? Are you able to come in? Yeah, yeah. Just going back into Gaelic.
Okay, well, sin your ashes a Gaelic, Galatian, Lakin. I'm just Yuri can't be na Harvin a Gaelic for Bliona, can she agree follows a chain from the Sculpture knocking, I guess that's in a message at the duly at this in a hack. Go agree for Bliona. Ach, be a Gaelic for smage, trichit persons a hiat, Suesco, carrot persons a hiat for Bliona. So Hannah Harvin Morris and Sculpture knocking.
Okay, thanks, Ray. So if there are no other questions, does everyone agree to note the report? Right, thank you. So we'll move on to item 17, which is the Barra and Vassay Campus, Community Campus. This report provides an update in relation to the progress of Barra and Vassay Community Campus project. The Chief Executive and Mr. Dan McPhail will speak to the report and answer any questions. Who wants to go first?
Thank you very much, Chair. This is a welcome report. I think it provides both an update on the progress of the project and it moves the project on to its next stage. The work of the project between our meeting in Battersea in April and our special meeting on 18th of July has really been to implement these decisions recently, particularly about selecting a preferred delivery strategy, the procurement route, how we appoint professional services, and that's all set out in this report and the appendix which Mr. McPhail has prepared. The other side, of course, is in relation to the funding of the project. Regular dialogue continues at political level and official level. However, the need to progress a rescoped project, this is us talking just for the avoidance of doubt, about the education and leisure elements of the Barra and Battersea Community Campus, the need to progress that rescoped project to market testing stage is urgent, and we all know the reasons for that. 2.2 sets out the process. You agreed, this committee agreed earlier in the year, along with Policy and Resources, that it would be delegated to me in consultation with the leader, with yourself, Chair, the strategy for the delivery strategy and the procurement route, and the result of that is set out in 2.2. Now, because we are moving more to an in-house model, assisted by the contractor, the Tier 1 contractor, because we're delivering through that framework, there's a need to revise the project governance structure. That I think is welcome. That includes, that's much more in-house. And the Project Executive Board, which had representation from NHS, Hub North and SFT, is no longer required, but we do need a new project board, and I'll come back to that in a moment. 2.5 notes a bit of understatement. It's anticipated that the next few weeks and months will be an intense period for the project, and the reasons for that are set out there. So the project board will be a demanding group. It will have a lot of meetings, it will have a lot of decisions, it will be meeting fairly regularly, so it's quite a commitment. So I will come on to that. Now, if I may, that's all set out in the appendix. The reasons for the approach we're taking are set out in detail there, and Mr. McPhail and I can take any questions on that, but I'll take these as read. I'm sure you've all read why we are where we are, and it's summarised in the report in any case. So to move to the project board, this is our biggest project in this capital programme by a long way. And after Goat Hill, of course, it's the biggest project across the islands. Now, the project board, there's a project board, there's a project team, as usual. There will also, I should add, be a reference group for community representatives. I'm conscious that Barra and Battersea has an area forum as well. Maybe these two groups overlap, but we'll pursue that. We'll pursue that in early course. The project board suggested, as usual, the leader, the deputy leader, yourself, chair, as chair of the relevant committee, the vice chair likewise, one local member. I'm acutely conscious there are two local members, of course, for Barra and Battersea, and that's, I would point out, of course, if the school was in Uist or Lewis, we wouldn't have all local members on the board. So having a choice is regrettable, but is consistent with good project management. The balance of 5 members, 3 officers, is probably about right. I should have added that Mr. McPhail and I, if you agree, will be principal advisors to the board with a right of attendance, because I certainly intend, both personally and through Mr. McPhail, to exercise a lot of personal supervision of the project. So the balance is there of five members, 3 officers. That's what we usually do. As I say, I do regret that implies a choice. Needless to say, we would, of course, include the member who wasn't selected with papers and briefing, of course, given the particular situation of Barra. I'll leave it there. Chair, happy to take questions. You're asked 2 recommendations: one, to note the report, which is quite significant in itself, and secondly, to agree the revised project governance arrangements set out in Appendix 1. And if you agree these, we would have to appoint 1 local member. All the other posts are ex officio. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Chief Executive. Is there anybody who wants to ask any questions? Councillor Ian McLeod.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor McLeod had to leave the meeting, but he requested that he thinks that both Barra members should be on this board. It's a pretty important project with a lot of work ahead in it. So he requested that both members, if possible, be put on the board.
Okay. How do you feel about Executive Chief? I mean, I don't have a personal problem with it, but it's how you feel about it.
Well, it's a decision for the Chamber, Chair. I mean, we are setting out what is in officers' view is the right balance of members, which is normally a slight majority of members. If there are 6 members and 3 officers, that majority obviously shifts. So it's a matter for yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Councillor Ray McKenzie.
I move both, Councillor, to be honest.
So if is anybody else against that? No. Then I'm happy with that as well. It's such a small area, you know. I think it's quite important that both are involved. So yeah. Okay. So, insofar as do members agree, insofar as the committee is interested to the recommendations at 3.1 with that change? Okay. Right. Thanks. Cheers. Right. So we move on to item 18, which is the minute of the meeting of the 27th of August 2024 of the local LNCT committee, and that's just submitted for information. And just like to take the opportunity to thank Councillor Francis Murray, who stepped in on a couple of occasions for me as chair, because I couldn't make it, and we won't go into that. So just thanks a lot for that, Francis. Item 19, performance management, reports outstanding. They're just for noting. So the next scheduled meeting of the committee will be on the 26th of November 2024. We'll now move into private. Can I ask that all non-relevant officers and members please leave the chamber and leave the meeting in general? Thank you.